Before the snow started falling that night, Mara Sutton had already decided she wasn't going to stop. She told herself that on the walk from the shelter kitchen to the bus stop, the garbage bag slung over her shoulder, the November wind cutting straight through the thin canvas of her jacket. She told herself that every night. Keep moving, don't stop. Because stopping, in Mara's experience, was where the trouble started. Stopping was where you noticed the hole in your boot, or remembered what day it was, or thought about the fact that your daughter hadn't called in 11 days. So she kept moving. The bus was late. It was always late on Thursdays, and Mara had learned not to wait for it standing still. She walked the length of the stop twice, then a third time, blowing into her cupped hands. The street was mostly empty, a pharmacy with its lights still on, a man walking a dog that didn't want to be walked, and then, just at the edge of the bus shelter's yellow light, something on the ground. She almost passed it. She would think about that later, how close she came to just walking right by. It was a brown leather case about the size of a hardcover book, half tucked against the base of the shelter's bench, like it had slid off and nobody noticed. Mara picked it up. It was heavier than she expected. She turned it over, a monogram on the clasp. VCH. She opened it. Inside was a USB drive in a velvet sleeve, 3 folded documents printed on legal paper, a business card that read Harcourt Capital Partners, Toronto, and a photograph. The photograph was the thing that made Mara stop breathing for a moment. It was a young girl, maybe 8 years old, laughing at something off camera. Written on the back in blue pen, "My Eleanor, first day of grade 3, September 2004. Mara stood there in the cold for a long time. She thought about the legal documents, which she hadn't read but which were obviously important. The kind of paper you only print when something needs to be signed. She thought about the business card, and she thought about Eleanor, whoever Eleanor was, and the person who had written that date on the back of the photograph like it was the most important thing in the world. The bus came. Mara watched it pull up, watched the doors open, watched the driver look at her. She didn't get on. Here is what you need to know about Mara Sutton before the rest of this story makes sense. She was 43 years old. She had grown up in Sudbury, the second of 4 kids, in a house where the heat was a negotiation every winter. Her mother had worked nights at a nursing home. Her father had worked days at the mill, and then for a long stretch in the 90s had not worked at all. Mara remembered being cold a lot. She remembered wearing her brother's old boots 2 sizes too big, stuffed with newspaper. She remembered exactly what it felt like to have nothing. She had built herself out of that, piece by piece. A college diploma she paid for herself over 6 years of part-time courses, a job with the city, then a better job, then a career. A daughter she raised mostly alone after her marriage fell apart when Becca was 4. A condo on Gerrard Street that she had finally finished paying off 2 years ago. And then, 14 months before the night she found the leather case, a diagnosis, multiple sclerosis, progressive. The neurologist had been kind about it, which almost made it worse. She had taken early retirement on medical grounds. She had moved in with her sister for a while, then moved back out when that became its own kind of hard. She had found the volunteer work at the shelter, 2 nights a week, serving dinner, because she needed somewhere to put her hands, somewhere to be useful, somewhere that wasn't the inside of her own apartment with its pill organizer on the counter and its handrail in the shower. She was not a woman who felt sorry for herself, but she was a woman who knew what it cost to lose things. And she knew, standing at that bus stop with the leather case in her hands, that whoever owned this had lost something that mattered. The USB she didn't care about, the document she didn't care about, but the photograph, the date written in blue pen, that was someone's Eleanor. And Mara Sutton was not the kind of person who walked away from that. The business card said Harcourt Capital Partners and listed a Bay Street address. There was no phone number for an individual, just a main line and a website. The name on the card was V.C. Harcourt, chairman. She looked it up on her phone, standing in the cold. The website was the kind that loaded slowly and said very little. A logo, some language about visionary investment and strategic partnerships, a photograph of a glass building. No faces, no names beyond the one on the card. She searched the names separately. V.C. Harcourt, Toronto. The results loaded. Mara read them standing under the pharmacy awning with the sleet starting to fall. Vivienne Claire Harcourt, founder and chairman of Harcourt Capital Partners, former appellate court judge. named one of Canada's most influential women in business 3 years running. Philanthropist. Private. There was one photograph from what looked like a gala. A woman in her 60s in a dark suit, gray hair cut close, expression that gave nothing away. Not the kind of face that expected to be surprised. Mara looked at the leather case in her hand. She looked at the address on the card. Bay Street was 40 minutes away by TTC. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. The Sleet was becoming something more serious. She went anyway. The building was not the kind of building that welcomed people who arrived on foot in the sleet at 10:15 on a Thursday night. It had a lobby that was all marble and indirect lighting, a desk staffed by a security guard who was young and large and had the particular expression of someone who had learned to look bored as a professional skill. He looked up when Mara pushed through the revolving door, and she watched him take her in, the wet jacket, the canvas bag, the damp hair, and file her in a category. "Building's closed," he said. "I'm not here for the building. I'm here for the 23rd floor. Harcourt Capital. Offices are closed. I understand that." Mara kept her voice even. She had spent 20 years dealing with city bureaucracy. She knew how to keep her voice even. "I found something that belongs to someone in this building. A leather case. It has documents in it. I'd like to return it." The guard looked at the case in her hands. "You can leave it with me. I'd rather it got to the right person directly, ma'am." He said it the way people say it when they mean we're done talking. "I can take it to Lost and Found in the morning, or you can take it to the police, but I can't let you upstairs." Mara stood there. The lobby was warm and she was aware of how wet she was, aware of how she must look to him. She thought about setting the case down on his desk and leaving. It would have been the reasonable thing to do. "Can you call someone?" she said. "Someone on that floor, just to let them know it's here. It's 10 o'clock at night. I know what time it is." The guard looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the case again. "You said you found it where?" "At the bus stop on Front Street. About an hour ago." Something shifted in his face, but Mara had been watching people's faces her whole life. He picked up his desk phone. He turned slightly away from her and spoke quietly. She heard fragments, claims to have found something. "Yes, a case. Yes." A long pause. "Understood." He hung up. "You can wait over there," he said, nodding toward a row of chairs near the window. Mara sat. She watched the sleet run down the glass. She thought about her sister calling her stubborn, which her sister did regularly and meant as a criticism, but which Mara had always understood as a compliment. She waited 22 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock above the security desk. Then the elevator doors opened, and a woman walked out. She was not what Mara expected, and then she was exactly what Mara expected. Vivian Harcourt was tall, not tall in the way that came from heels. She was wearing flat leather boots, but tall in the way that some people are tall, like the room adjusts itself around them. She was in her late 60s, though she wore it the way certain women do, as if age were simply information rather than verdict. She had on a dark coat over what looked like a sweater, her gray hair slightly less composed than the photograph had suggested. She had been called down from somewhere, from whatever she did at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. She looked at Mara. She did not look at her the way the security guard had. "You found it at the Front Street stop?" Her voice was direct, not warm, not cold. A judge's voice, Mara thought. A voice that had spent years in rooms where what you said was the last word. "Yes, about 9:30 it was on the ground near the bench. I was there just before 9. Vivian crossed the lobby. "I got in a car and didn't realize until we were on the Gardener." "The photograph," Mara said. "That's what made me come." Something happened in Vivian Harcourt's face. Very small and very fast. "The photograph. On the back it says September 2004, grade 3. Mara held the case out to her. "I figured that wasn't something you could just replace." Vivienne took the case. She held it for a moment without opening it, the way you hold something when you're not sure you're ready for it. Then she opened the clasp and looked inside, and when she saw the photograph she pressed her lips together briefly, and Mara looked away to give her that. "The USB has the Kellerman contracts on it," Vivienne said after a moment. "We close on Monday. I've had people looking for this for 2 hours." She paused. "You came all the way here in this weather." "My bus didn't come," Mara said. "I had time." Vivienne looked at her steadily. "That's not why." It wasn't a question. Mara didn't answer it like one. "Eleanor," she said simply. Vivienne closed the case. "My daughter, she passed away." 14 years ago. She said it the way people say things they've said many times, which doesn't mean it hurts less, only that the shape of the hurt is familiar. The photograph is the only one I still carry. Mara nodded. She didn't say she was sorry. In her experience, I'm sorry was something people said when they didn't know what else to do, and Vivian Harcourt did not look like a woman who needed someone else's uncertainty. I should let you go, Mara said. It's late. Wait. Vivian said it without hesitation, like a decision already made. I want to know your name, Mara. Mara Sutton. How did you get here, Mara? TTC. You took the subway here and were planning to take it back. That's the general idea. Vivian looked at her for a long moment. My car is outside. My driver will take you home. That's not necessary. I know it isn't. Something in Vivian's expression didn't exactly soften, but it became less formal. Let me anyway. The car was a black SUV with heated seats and a driver named Harold, who had the manner of someone who understood that his job was to be invisible. Mara sat in the back and looked out at the city, moving past, and felt the warmth seeping back into her hands. Vivian sat beside her, which surprised Mara. You don't have to, I'm aware. Vivian had the leather case on her lap. Tell me something. You saw the USB. You saw the documents. Yes, most people would have just kept them. Mara turned to look at her. Some people would. Some people wouldn't. You clearly needed to return it tonight. You could have waited until morning, gone to the office. But you came here at 10 o'clock in the sleet. Mara thought about how to answer that. She thought about the photograph and the date written in blue pen and a mother who had loved her daughter so much she still carried a 20-year-old picture in a leather case. She thought about her own daughter, 11 days without a call. Someone lost something that mattered to them, she said finally. I know what that feels like. Vivienne was quiet for a moment. The contracts are important. Closing on Monday means work for a lot of people. Livelihoods. She paused. But you're right. That's not the only thing that was in there. They rode in silence for a while. The city slid past the windows. Harold took the gardener east, and Mara watched the lake appear and disappear between buildings. What do you do? Vivian asked. I'm retired. I used to work for the city. Planning and development. How long? 22 years. And now? Mara looked at her hands. I volunteer at a shelter on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Other than that, I'm mostly… She stopped. She had been about to say figuring it out, which was the polite version. I had some health news last year. I'm still finding my footing. Vivienne nodded slowly. I had a period like that, she said. After Eleanor, nothing worked the way it was supposed to, and I'd been someone who could always make things work. She paused. It takes time to rebuild a life around something that doesn't go away. Mara looked at her. It was a strange thing to hear from a stranger, but it was true, and it was said without pity, which was the only way Mara could stand to receive truth. Yes, she said. It does. Harold pulled up on Gerrard Street. Mara could see her building's lights ahead. She reached for the door. Mara. Vivienne's voice stopped her. I don't do this lightly, but I would like to have coffee with you sometime. If you're willing. Mara turned back. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. Something in Vivienne's expression was different now. Not the judge, not the chairman, just a woman of 67 who had been carrying a photograph for 14 years and had found tonight slightly harder than expected. I want to, if you're willing. Mara looked at her for a moment. I'm usually free on Fridays, she said. She thought about it that night, lying in bed listening to the sleet against the window. She thought about how close she had come to letting the bus doors close and going home, how easy it would have been. She thought about her daughter not calling. She thought about the handrail in the shower and the pill organizer on the counter and how there were days lately when her apartment felt like a waiting room and she couldn't always say what she was waiting for. She thought about a woman in a dark coat pressing her lips together in a marble lobby because someone had brought her back something she couldn't replace. Then she stopped thinking and went to sleep. That Friday they met at a coffee shop on King Street that Vivienne had suggested. The kind of place that was quiet enough to talk, busy enough that neither of them had to perform. Mara wore her good coat. She told herself that was coincidence. Vivienne was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with black coffee and her phone face down. She looked different in daylight, more approachable maybe, or maybe Mara was just less wet. They talked for 2 hours. It started the way these things do, with surface things. The neighborhood, the coffee, the cold snap. Then it became something else. Vivian talked about Eleanor in a way that made Mara understand she didn't talk about Eleanor often, and trusted the table enough to do it now. Mara talked about Becca and the distance and the disease in a way that surprised her a little, how much came out once she started. My foundation does a lot of work in transitional housing, Vivian said at some point. Skills development, employment re-entry. There's a gap I've been trying to figure out for years, how to serve women in their 40s and 50s who leave careers because of illness or caregiving and then can't figure out how to come back. The programs don't fit them. Mara said nothing. She was listening. You spent 22 years in planning and development. You understand city systems. You understand the people those systems are supposed to serve. And clearly you understand something about dignity. Vivian looked at her steadily. I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a problem worth solving if you want it. A consulting role. Part-time, flexible, designed around what you can actually do. With the understanding that you tell me when it's too much and I believe you. Mara sat with that for a moment. Why? She said. Vivian picked up her coffee. Because I watch how people behave when they think nothing is at stake. You could have left that case at lost and found. You could have taken it to the police and washed your hands of it. You stood in the cold and in the sleet and came across the city on a Thursday night because of a photograph of a little girl. She set down her cup. That's the kind of judgment I've been trying to find for this work for 3 years. Mara looked out the window at King Street. A streetcar was going by, orange in the gray morning, and she watched it until it was gone. Part-time, she said. Entirely, and I tell you when it's too much, and I believe you. Yes, Mara looked back at her. She thought about her apartment and the pill organizer and the waiting room feeling. She thought about the 22 years and what it had meant to be useful, genuinely useful, in ways that mattered to real people in real places. I'd want to see the program design first, she said. What exists, what doesn't, what the gap actually looks like. I'll have it sent to you tomorrow, and I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear just because you're. Mara stopped. Because of who you are. Vivian almost smiled. It was brief, but it was real. I would be very disappointed if you did. She called Becca that night. Her daughter picked up on the third ring, which she usually didn't, which already made it different. They talked for 40 minutes, longer than they'd talked in months, maybe a year. At some point in the middle of it, Mara heard something shift in her daughter's voice, something loosen, and she realized that Becca had been waiting, had been wanting to call, had been standing on her own side of some silence they had both built, and neither had known how to cross. I'm sorry I didn't call, Becca said. I'm sorry I didn't either, Mara said. They made a plan to see each other at Christmas. They made it like they meant it. After she hung up, Mara sat at her kitchen table for a while in the quiet. The pill organizer was on the counter. The handrail was in the shower. Those things were still true. None of that had changed. But something else was true now too, and she let herself feel it. Monday morning, the Kellerman contracts closed. Mara read about it in the business section, which she didn't usually read, and thought about Harold and the heated car and the sleet on the gardener. On Wednesday, she received an email from the Harcourt Foundation with 3 attachments, a program outline, a gap analysis, and a note from Vivian that said only, "Tell me what you see." Mara made a cup of tea. She sat down, she read, she saw things. She knew she would, and she wrote back, carefully, honestly, without softening the parts that needed to be said clearly, because that was the kind of person she was and always had been, even in the years when nobody was asking. There is a version of this story that ends with a number, a dollar amount, a contract, a headline. That version would not be untrue. The consulting work became something more over time. The Foundation's transitional program for mid-career women on medical leave launched in the spring. It reached 43 women in its first intake. There were wait lists within a month, but that is not the version that matters most. The version that matters most is this: a woman in a wet jacket standing at a bus stop in the sleet, holding something that wasn't hers, and choosing, when she had every reason not to care about it anyway, because that choice, made in the cold before anyone was watching, before there was any reason to believe it would matter, was the first thing. Everything else came from it. Vivian still carries the photograph. Mara knows this because she has seen it, once, when they were having lunch, and it slipped from the leather case onto the table. That little girl mid-law in a September schoolyard, caught forever at the start of grade 3. She is still there. She always will be. And some things you protect not because you own them, but because you understand what they're worth. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone, or something you've carried, or something you chose to do right when no one was looking, please share it. Leave a comment. Let us know. The world doesn't run short of kindness. It runs short of people willing to act on it. We'll see you in the next one, right here on Velvet Honor.